the light bulb light has to come on at some point. And generally speaking, that will happen when you've hit rock bottom. But that was an opportunity that I grasped. If you're a single man or woman and you still, don't trust yourself, then it's going to have to be someone that you.
Tony, you have given me a few bullet points, and the first bullet point that I would love to talk to you about is you have to want to stop.
Yeah. And I think, there's hundreds, obviously thousands of problem gamblers that find it difficult to stop gambling, regardless of what advice or support they've been given. And generally that'll be through friends and family. They'll understand, not totally understand, but they'll have an awareness of what's happening, in terms of the serious debt, in terms of how it's impacted on their family. So as you're going along that journey, you'll be aware of what's actually going on. Not initially, but as you get into that journey, you'll be aware, because you'll be constantly told by people close to you that, you've got to stop your gambling, you've got to cut your gambling down, this is what's happening, you can't keep borrowing money, etc., etc. All those things will come into play. So eventually, the light bulb light has to come on at some point. And generally speaking, that will happen when you've hit rock bottom. That's the majority of problem gamblers, unfortunately. So, and that's where I say it has to come from within. So you have to really, from deep within, you have to really want to make a change. It can't be 50%, 70%, 80%. It has to be 100% from you, that you actually want to do something. And then eventually, once you've acknowledged that, then you will make the next step, which is obviously to seek professional support and professional help. And that was the case with me. I talked earlier in previous interviews about the denial factor, and we stay in denial for years and years and years. We've talked about the shame that comes with it. We've talked about the guilt that comes with it. And all those things are true. But there comes a point, such as in my case, where once I acknowledged that I've got to address this problem, and was willing to go public with it, which is obviously my first media interview was Billy's Breakfast, 2013. That's my moment now to own it. That's my moment to own my addiction and say, right, okay, now's the time. So it'll be different for different people of when they're ready, because you have to be ready. Some people will, they might stop or cut down the gambling, but then have a relapse, within a week, within 2 days, because they're not ready. They're not ready to stop completely. So, it's very, very difficult.
And see, that kind of nicely goes into the second point, is that you have to be ready to stop, because there's a big difference between wanting and actually being mentally ready.
Yeah. And being ready is just like the whole recovery journey is different for everybody. So being ready for me, that the fact that I'm now acknowledging I've got the problem, the fact that I'm now accepting it and I'm owning it, that tells me that I'm now ready to face my demons. I'm now ready to face my family and face my close friends. And obviously in my case, which isn't the case in everybody, because obviously, I suppose you could say I became a little bit of a public figure. So for me, facing the media, but that's not the same for everybody. So I'm ready. I'm ready now. So I'm ready to open up. I'm ready to talk about it. So that in my case, that was perfect for me. And obviously that coincided with the publication of the first book, Red Card, which went alongside, that BBC interview, because obviously that was me telling my story. So for others, it depends where you are in your life. And that's, in terms of the workplace, in terms of your relationships, in terms of your mental health. So it all depends on where you are in your life as to whether you are ready to actually, open up, talk about it, accept it, acknowledge it, and own it.
So third point was you've got to put certain prevention tools in place. Can you elaborate on that?
The prevention tools that I'm talking about is generally things that they're not necessarily 100% to stop gambling, but they can be to stop gambling. They can be to address gambling, reduce your gambling. So things like, for example, so a lot of people might use, deposit limits and low deposit limits. They might still want to have a bet, but, on the low end of the scale. And that's risky because obviously the addiction is such a powerful addiction, gambling addiction, that regardless of people put deposit limits in place, if you're an adder, you're going to raise them deposits, you're going to do all kinds of things. And they're not really going to maybe not have such an impact because of the nature of the addiction. So more practical prevention tools that do work from our perspective, and what we highlight in our workshops is, tools such as GamBan or GamStop, where you're actually literally doing something to stop yourself from gambling. So that will be to stop yourself from getting onto gambling websites, to stop yourself from downloading gambling apps. So if you're someone that predominantly gambles online, which majority of problem gamblers do, and you put those things in place, which is not going to allow you to bet online in terms of gambling apps and gambling websites, then that's a massive, massive step. Because I think that generally speaking, the initial period is going to be 6 months, but you can ban yourself from those sites up to 5 years. So our team members have done it. So if you're someone that where your gambling has predominantly been online, then that's a great tool to use, great platform to use in terms of making sure that you don't have access to gambling websites and gambling apps. So it's a massive step. And those prevention tools can go alongside other things, such as, so for example, one of our team members who's been on a particular journey, he now gives his salary, so his monthly salary, to his partner, and that cuts out any risk. Maybe and as I said, everyone's different. So maybe for him, he doesn't trust himself, which is fine. So he's taken steps to make sure that he doesn't relapse. So his partner will look after the funds and pay the bills and pay the mortgage, etc. So these are huge steps that people can do themselves if they really, really want to address their gambling. So yeah, it does come down to prevention. In terms of the broader scale of people out there listening, obviously education is key, but there are things that individuals can do to help support their own problems with gambling.
Do you think physical betting shops have prevention tools in place, and do you think they are sufficient?
We're not aware of any real prevention tools in place within land-based gambling, such as betting shops. There'll be leaflets, there'll be advice leaflets, those kind of things, but there won't be anything physical within the betting shops that we're aware of. And I think land-based gambling obviously is not as prevalent as online gambling today. I think it's generally speaking, it's the older generation, the 30 plus generally. And I think, obviously there's thousands of people that still prefer land-based gambling, but there isn't anything major. The only thing that I suppose goes alongside, sort of works alongside the prevention tools is things like land-based self-exclusion. So if you can ban yourself from either local bookmakers, area bookmakers, or national bookmakers, which means that's the MOSES, the multi-operator self-exclusion scheme, which you can sign up for. Now, yes, it's someone that's addressing their gambling. It's someone that wants to do something, so they'll ban themselves, they'll self-exclude. But at the moment now, I'm not sure if it's every bookmakers, if it's in place yet. But I know there's some where you have facial recognition, because obviously if you ban yourself from bookmakers and you get to a position where, I don't know, something happens within your life and you want to start gambling again in the bookmakers, and you walk in there, then obviously there's some that may have facial recognition to stop you and look out for you as someone that's self-excluded. So not really a great tool, but you then taken basically relying on shop staff to point you out if you've walked in there and someone that's self-excluded and wants to start gambling. And I'm not sure that's really efficient. So yeah, nothing major within the land-based gambling at the moment.
Do you think physical betting shops or or I'll say betting companies have the infrastructure? Because I've just thought of an idea now. Hear me out. What if betting shops had their own kind of almost like their card, like like a physical card, where you kind of go into a betting shop, especially in a kind of physical premises, and you've got to put money onto that card, and then whoever's behind the cashier can actually monitor how much money you are actually spending, and then they can almost cap a limit. So then there's a kind of a second thought process to actually put your money onto a card, and it kind of gives people that extra minute or two to actually think about if they actually want to continue betting.
That's like putting a limit, I don't know, on topping up, I don't know,
yes,
a phone card or an Oyster card or whatever, topping it up, and that kind of process. I suppose it would depend on any restrictions on how much you can top up on that card. So if that card has no restriction in terms of no limits of what you can top up on that card, and you, I don't know, for argument's sake, you put £5,000 on that card, then you've got £5,000 that you can go and spend in the bookers, and whether you spend that, for some people, if you're at the height of an addiction and compulsion and you've got a problem, then you could spend that £5,000 in a couple of days, depending on what you're gambling on. So what's to stop that person spending X amount of money, who may have a problem with gambling, and then there's no limit in terms of what they can put on that card. So I think it'd have to be thought about, and really in terms of what spend is restricted. Okay. So if it was, I don't know, if there was £100 limit on the card, and you wasn't allowed to use debit cards, obviously credit cards you can't use anyway within land-based gambling. So you wasn't allowed to use debit card. You could only use, basically a designated, for that particular bookmaker's betting card, for want of a better phrase. And there's £100 limit, then you can only lose £100. Whether that's £100 within 7 days or £100 a day. It all comes down to what's being talked about in the industry in terms of affordability. So it's all about the affordability checks, that kind of thing, what's coming into play. So what is someone allowed to spend without any restriction? So so it's something that takes a lot of thought, but I just think that it's a difficult one because putting in place how much someone is allowed to spend on a particular day. So it's a difficult one.
Another bullet point that you gave me was for people to find another hobby to actually fill in their time.
We always say in terms of, and this also relates, I say the younger generation, we're talking 13, 14, 15, 16 year olds, but it also applies to adults as well. But what I'm talking about is this correlation between gaming and gambling, because they both take your time. So whether you're spending hours and hours on FIFA or Call of Duty, whatever it is, or whether you're spending hours on online gambling, it takes your time, and that's the one thing that you cannot get back. So time, you're going to have to fill that time. So for example, I do table tennis now. So I've joined a table tennis club. I'm in a table tennis league. I've got a match tonight, actually. I've got a match tonight, and it's great because it takes up a lot of my time. And then obviously I'm full time in the office, so I'm always in the office Monday to Friday, and then weekends I'll see family. So doing different things, whether it's the gym, whether it's taking up new hobbies, whether it's spending more time with your family, whether it's spending more time with your kids, there's lots of different things that you can do in terms of filling the void and filling that time. Because anyone that's been on a gambling addiction journey will be fully aware that the amount of time that you've lost in those weeks, months, or years, it's a hell of a lot. So you have to fill that time with something more constructive and something more positive that's going to keep you away from gambling.
You mentioned this in a previous bullet point. If you don't trust yourself, with your wages, give it to your partner.
Yeah, one of our team members. Yeah.
What if you're a single man or woman?
Good question. If you're a single man or woman and you still, you know, don't trust yourself, then it's going to have to be someone that you trust. It's going to have to be another family member. It's going to have to be a close friend. It's going to have to be somebody that you 100% trust. If you still don't trust yourself, somebody that you can rely on and trust to say, look, you know, I don't 100% trust myself with the money. So would you look after this and, you know, pay into your account every month? Yeah. But it's got to be someone that you have 120% trust in. So again, it can be done depending on your personal circumstances and who, you know, your circles.
Another bullet point that you gave me was to speak to a professional, a counselor or a therapist.
I mean, I'm not, you know, an expert in terms of the addiction. I've learned a lot over the years in terms of the nature of this addiction. So we can talk about, we're all wired up differently. We can talk about the massive dopamine hit that we get, the reward centers in the brain, how our brain operates, you know, in terms of, you know, favorable or exciting or pleasurable activities. So the addiction is very, very powerful. And so it's the type of addiction, just like the majority of addictions, it's the type of addiction that you cannot wake up in the morning one day and say, I'm going to stop gambling today after gambling for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't work like that. So that's why I say there comes a time where you will need professional support, professional help to actually address that addiction because it's deep and it's complex. And obviously it's all about, you know, your thought process, your behavior, all those kind of things come into play. So those things have to be changed and reversed. So that's why we say when we talk to our psychotherapist at Red Card, she talks us a lot about that in terms of the change of behavior and change of thought process, change of your lifestyle, all kinds of things. So it is deep. It is quite complex, the addiction itself. Hence why it's now termed as, you know, a mental health disorder. Obviously, it's a public health issue now. It's a serious, complex addiction. So with that means that you need professional help. So the professional help can come in different forms. I don't know if we're going to touch upon different times of recovery, but the professional help will be different for different individuals.
We can talk about different types of professional help.
Yeah. So within our team, for example, I'll use our team as an example because they're all different. So you've got one person that's been and it still goes to GA, which is Gambling Anonymous. So he's someone that is comfortable with sitting around a table with like-minded people, talking and sharing about his journey, etc. It can be a little bit regimented in terms of timetables, and then obviously there's a slightly religious element to it in terms of higher power, and the higher power is different for everybody again. So that suits him. Then we've had another one that's been through the actual treatment process in terms of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, through GamCare. So they're obviously a huge treatment provider in the UK, and thousands of people will have treatment through GamCare. So he's been on a treatment program, addressing his gambling through that program, and that again, that suited him. And then you've got someone else that went through a residential treatment. So that's again another form of treatment whereby you're actually, you know, moving away from home, having restrictions on your phone, having restrictions on money, again, around like-minded people, but on specific programs. It could be 6, it could be 12 weeks, residential treatment. So again, another form of treatment. So it really is different for every individual. And myself, it's a culmination of things which I've touched upon before in terms of 6 weeks counselling. For me, because I suppose it's partly because of where I've been previous in terms of being a footballer. So, you know, missing that career, you know, sort of having to try and fill the void after coming out of professional football, and, you know, like lots of ex-sportsmen and women, what you're going to do next, and then continuing the gambling addiction after football. I think it was my thoughts were about, I don't want to go on like this forever. So what's next? What does the future hold? So my counselling wasn't just about the gambling addiction and the impact that had on my life and family, but it was also about where do you want to be in 5 years' time? What does the future look like? Giving me hope. And then obviously really thinking about what's happening with my life in terms of who's impacted by my gambling. So it's a whole range of things. That was part of the recovery. The other part was family support. So there's lots of people out there that might be listening now. They might be thinking, well, I've got any brothers or sisters. You know, my mum's left me or my dad's left me. I'm on my own or single parent, like you said earlier. And they will find it more difficult because they're isolated. So they're going to be more vulnerable and they're going to find it difficult because they haven't got a network of support. So I have 5 brothers and a sister who stuck by me to this day. So I've been fortunate that I've had that network support. So with that network support, that helps me recover and not to go back to where I was. So the counselling, the family support, and then the third thing. So mine was a combination of 3 things that really got me to where I am today. And that is, as we touched upon before, and again, it's individual, is my faith. So regaining my faith in 2017, June 7, 2017, and getting baptized. I suppose if you look now, 8 years later, you know, to where I am today, to where I was then, it's just a ridiculous and unbelievable transformation in my life. And I put that down to God opening up doors and guiding me. So when I put all that together, that's where and why I am where I am today.
Amazing. And the last point regarding how to stop gambling that you've put down is to share your experiences with like-minded people, which you've kind of touched upon. But I would love for you to go really, really deep with.
Yeah, it's something that I think, you know, I really push out there a lot in terms of testimonials, in terms of lived experience, in terms of sharing personal stories. And it's something that I never thought, again, you know, I could say that's another pathway that God has opened up for me. But that aside, I never thought that, you know, back in 2013, 14, when I'm sitting on that red sofa at BBC Breakfast, I never thought that this was going to be my life. You know, because obviously it took a lot of mental strength and courage to be able to go into whatever 6.7 million people that were listening on that day, to be able to share my story to the nation. So it wasn't something that I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to be continue doing this for the rest of my life. That didn't enter my head at all. I didn't know what was ahead of me. Red Card Gambling Sport Project wasn't even born, so I don't even know what the future held. But what has stuck in my mind from that interview and the feedback from that interview was how much it resonated with so many people. And I think within 3 or 4 weeks, I had my first offer of doing a public speaking talk for a friend in Coventry. And that would have been my first ever public speaking talk. So an opportunity to share my story with, I think it was 200 people, a Black and Asian gala dinner evening in Coventry at a hotel. I was asked to do 15 minutes about my story, and the book had just come out. And so obviously, you know, not being used to public speaking and obviously nerves and all the rest of it. But that was an opportunity that I grasped. And so when I think of the 2 things that really opened my eyes about gambling addiction, the BBC Breakfast interview and that first public speaking engagement, that's really what opened my eyes in terms of the scale of gambling within the UK, how it resonates with so many people, and getting a better understanding about, you know, I'm not alone, basically. That's when I realised, wow, this is huge. I'm not alone here. Emails, phone calls about people. You know, I remember at that first talk where afterwards, when we're networking and you know, parents coming up to me and saying about finding their, you know, son's betting slips in the bin, other way around, daughters coming up to saying finding their dad's betting slips in the bin and all that, he's got a problem. And so I started to realise now that this is a national issue. We know it's a global issue, but this is a national issue in terms of there are, you know, hundreds of thousands of people that are struggling with gambling, and I certainly wasn't alone. So I thought, right, for me to share that's my story and to get that impact and that feedback, then this is something that I want to try and continue. And then that sort of, propelled me to sort of, I suppose, set up the Redcar Gambling Sport Project to do more. So since then, I think now when we talk about the lived experience community and we talk about how it's important to share our stories and testimonials to, to the nation wherever possible, I just think it helps others understand that it's okay to have a gambling addiction and it's okay to talk about it. There's still a little bit of a taboo subject in some circles, but we have to embrace the fact that whoever is able to share their stories and whoever's comfortable to share their story and their testimony, then it's a massive, massive thing. And we use it a lot in our workshops. It's very, very powerful learning tool because people get to understand what gambling addiction actually looks like and what it feels like because they're listening to people that have walked in those shoes. And that is just massive. My biggest achievement is being debt free. And I was talking to my sister about that only a few weeks ago. And I'm in a great position where, I'm, I suppose, financially comfortable. Me and my fiance are just getting a house, which we'll move into in February. So when I think to where I am, to where I was, say, back in 2013, 14, with all the serious debt, and obviously the bankruptcy in 2009, and I think about all the financial ruin that I've been through to where I am today, to be able to, I'm proud that I've been able to manage money for the last 10 years, be able to get debt free. When I go on my clear score and it's like 899, I think I have 100 and no missed payments for 7 years and all those kind of things, it just makes me think, wow, how did I ever get to that point? Because I've never been debt free since I was 19 years old. So I think that's my biggest achievement in terms of sorting out my demons, sorting out my finances, sorting out my life, being stable, and sustainable, and more importantly, running the Redcar Project for this is now 10 years.